In a small, forgotten town, nestled between dense woods and rolling hills, lay the old Elmwood Cemetery. Once, it had been a place of peace, but over the years, it had fallen into disrepair. Weeds overtook the gravestones, and broken statues of angels wept silently in the moonlight. The townspeople spoke of it only in hushed tones, often avoiding it altogether. Harold Brooks was the cemetery's keeper. He was a solitary man, having taken up the job after his wife's passing, finding solace in the silence and routine of tending the graves. His days were filled with cleaning and mending, and his nights were spent in the small, dilapidated shack he called home, right next to the cemetery. One particularly chilly October evening, as Harold walked among the graves, a chilling breeze swept through the cemetery, making the branches of the old oak trees rattle. The wind carried with it an unsettling whisper, a sound that seemed to echo from the depths of the earth itself. Harold dismissed it as his imagination playing tricks on him and continued his work. As the sun set, the cemetery was cloaked in darkness, and Harold prepared to head back to his shack. Just as he was about to leave, he noticed something unusual, a recently disturbed grave, the earth around it disheveled and loose. A cold shiver ran down his spine. The grave was of a woman named Eleanor Blackwood, who had been buried there nearly a century ago. Curiosity got the better of Harold. He decided to investigate, despite the eerie feeling that gnawed at him. He grabbed a lantern and a spade and set to work. The deeper he dug, the more he felt the oppressive weight of the air around him. His hands trembled, but he pressed on, driven by an inexplicable urge. Finally, he reached the coffin. It was old and rotting, the wood splintering under his touch. Harold hesitated but then pried it open. Inside, he found something that made his blood run cold, a skeletal body, but it was not Eleanor Blackwood. Instead, the corpse was of a young woman, her face frozen in a silent scream. The body had been buried alive, its hands desperately clawing at the inside of the coffin. Harold's heart pounded in his chest. He knew something was terribly wrong. The town had always spoken of Eleanor Blackwood with a certain reverence, suggesting she was a woman of great importance. But why would her grave contain the remains of another woman? As he replaced the coffin and covered the disturbed grave, Harold's thoughts raced. The cemetery had always had its share of strange occurrences, but this was different. The wind howled louder, and the whispers grew more insistent. Harold felt eyes watching him from the shadows. That night, as he lay in his shack, sleep eluded him. Every creak of the old building and gust of wind seemed to carry the mournful cries of the woman in the grave. Harold knew he had to find out more. The next day, he visited the town's historical society to delve into Eleanor Blackwood's past. The records were sparse but revealing. Eleanor Blackwood had been a woman of great influence and wealth, but she had been accused of witchcraft and wrongfully condemned. Her trial had been a sham, and her burial had been hurried and secretive, with many believing she had been buried alive as a cruel twist of fate. The townsfolk had kept the secret for generations, but the truth had surfaced. Harold understood now. The cemetery was haunted not by ghosts seeking revenge, but by a deep, restless sorrow, a reflection of the injustice and cruelty that had occurred. Returning to the cemetery, Harold felt a profound sense of responsibility. He could not change the past, but he could ensure that the wrongs were acknowledged and honored. Over the weeks that followed, he dedicated himself to restoring the cemetery, clearing the overgrown graves, and memorializing those who had suffered unjustly. The whispers in the cemetery grew quieter, and the oppressive feeling began to lift. Harold found solace in knowing he had given peace to the restless souls, even if it came too late. And while the old Elmwood Cemetery remained a place of reflection and remembrance, it was no longer a place of dread. For Harold Brooks, the gravekeeper, the cemetery had become a testament to truth and redemption, a place where the past was honored, and the silence spoke not of fear but of the quiet dignity of those who had once been wronged.